Oh, Derbyshire, hat-trick! Adelaide United, like statues at the back. And Matt Derbyshire has his first hat-trick down under.
We should probably give him more cowbell.
Hey, baby, I gotta have more cowbell.
And Holman, what a touch that is down the line. There's no one keeping up with him in the middle. Absolutely no one.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest episode of Bull Banter, the podcast where two brothers from the Southwest talk about the Macarthur Bulls, A-League, and all things football. You're joined by myself, Blake Sims, and my brother Daniel. How are you today, Dan?
I'm not too bad. Ready to cover all the exciting news and results from the A-League over the past week and talk everything Macarthur Bulls.
And before we jump into it, Daniel, can you remind our valued listeners where you can find us on all social media?
Yes, lovely listeners. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Bull Banter. Also, go to bullbanter.com for some nice articles and all of our content available there. Our podcast is available on Spotify and YouTube. Search it up and you'll find it. So
let's get into it. Well, we have a brilliant piece of content to bring to you as well, a review of probably the best 90 minutes of football that our team's been able to put together. Our win 4-0 against Adelaide at Campbelltown on Friday. What did you see in this match, Daniel, that stood out?
Other than the heavy rain again, that certainly stood out. But yeah, it was initial thoughts. I thought we didn't play I thought the first half was a bit lackluster, but upon looking at the footage, we were all over them. Even though it didn't seem like we were creating too much, there was a couple of really good chances in the first half that could have put us up early. But yeah, that second half when those two substitutions were made from Milicic, it just changed the game and was a great atmosphere at the ground.
Yeah, it's I got to be honest with you. I've watched the highlights about 17 times. It was so good to see. In the first half, I tend to agree with you. I think maybe we just had a little bit of, not the team necessarily, but the supporters had a bit of anxiety. Up until this point, we hadn't won at home, despite looking quite good on the road. And so it was like, when's the penny going to drop? When are we going to be able to celebrate one at home? And thankfully we were able to. But, in that first half, despite making some pretty good opportunities and clearer chances than we maybe expect. It was tough going for a little bit, and you thought, are we going to be able to put one away? Is it going to be maybe a repeat of the Central Coast game where we're all over them and they just get a crappy goal and that's it? But no, fortunately for us, once Derbyshire's header went in just after half time, the floodgates really opened, and you could see it was kind of like the Adelaide players dropped. We were cutting through them like we were preparing dinner. It was almost too easy at times. And, like you said, the atmosphere was fantastic. Despite the rain and the sort of turgid conditions, the people who did turn out to Campbelltown Stadium were, provided with some excellent football. If we play like that every week, I'm happy to go sit in Campbelltown Stadium all wet and soggy.
Yeah, and definitely no issues getting out-chanted by our opposition this week. The bullpen was absolutely packed, and it's also pretty easy to out-chant those 5 Adelaide fans that rocked up. But yeah, you were in the bullpen for the whole game. I was in there for a bit of the first half before I got drenched. But yeah, tell us, what was the bullpen like for you?
It wasn't bad. I was sort of going in there thinking, last few weeks it's sort of been one of those things where, according to the bullpen, the police have sort of said to them, you can't chant because of COVID restrictions. And but then obviously you look on the away section and it's, Wanderers doing their choreography and chanting, Sydney doing their choreography and chanting. So it's kind of like, this week they just decided to go for it, despite a couple of warnings from police, but there was nothing sort of malicious about it. They sort of told us to sit down every now and then. But we were able to, get a big response going, not just with our call and response chants, but, people were sort of learning it as they went on. It got louder and louder. And obviously that helped. It was helped by the fact that the players were able to put on a good performance. Really quite an awesome time. And, it's making me consider being an active supporter a bit more often. But yeah, it's maybe not also always in the rain.
Yeah, that's Yeah, for the short time I was in there, it's vibes. It's just peak atmosphere in there. So definitely excited to get back in there.
Yeah, I got to be honest. Like, I'm a school teacher, and I'm used to sort of yelling at kids all the time. But by the end of the match, like I went home, had a shower, and then I tried to say hello to my wife, and I couldn't say anything. I'd lost my voice completely, and didn't come back till Sunday. So I guess it's all part of it. It's what you want, and I think we're able to put in a little bit of extra atmosphere for the fans that did show up, and hopefully that can continue because I'm sure it's one of those things. Once you get people on board and it starts growing, it starts becoming a attractive product, people are going to be more interested in it. Even I noticed that at halftime, the kids who were sort of sitting around in the next bay jumped in with us. Even I forget now, but just remembered George Basidovic, our mayor of Campbelltown, actually jumped in there after the 80th minute, was waving the flag, was getting drenched in his full suit. He didn't care. He was a bit different to Gladys Berejiklian, our apparently number one supporter, who just popped on for a sideline interview under an umbrella. But there you go. That's true support. I love it. I'd love to see George there more often as well, representing.
Yeah, I suppose digging into the game a bit more, were there really any standouts in the first half here? Obviously, Jake Coleman was pretty exciting with his thrilling run down the sideline there, and that through ball that could have seen us going up 1-0, but Derbyshire couldn't put it past that defender there.
Yeah, he looks a real inventive player. I think he was definitely the bright spark in the first half, but it was one of those games where we just had to keep building and keep the pressure on. Derbyshire had 2 opportunities to score. One that was like a blatant, like almost wasteful way that he didn't quite put his foot through it. He kind of was, I wouldn't say lazy, but just casual with the finish.
Off balance. He thought he had more time than he did, probably.
Yeah. One was kind of just a freak deflection that Elsie was just able to get in the way of a goal-bound header. But the second one with, I think it was Noah James, a young centre-back from Adelaide, he was able to slide in when really the ball shouldn't have been on the ground with the defender in that position. It should have been, almost impossible for him if it was at a hip height or anywhere else. But it just so happened that he got to it right on the line. And Derbyshire, you saw it on the replays. He turned around and looked absolutely shocked, like, man, I should have buried that. But, you think on another night, Derbyshire, the form he was in and the form the team was in, he could have scored maybe 6. I mean, he was just on fire.
Definitely 5.
Yeah, but, absolutely.
He's just a menace in the 6-yard box, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a poacher. I mean, he's an old-fashioned kind of striker, a little bit of hold-up play, whip it out wide and get into the box before the defender can track you. And, he was certainly doing that. By the end, he was just so elusive. It was like he was, stealthing between the centre-backs and just getting on the end of things. And that's exactly what his game's all about. I think to this point, we've not really given him service that he requires to really fulfill his potential. But I think the boys are working him out, especially some brilliant crosses coming in from Tommy Orr certainly, helped him show what he can do for us. And, especially that assist for the second goal was an absolutely perler of a ball. The vision to see, I can put it in between the keeper and the back line and know that Matt Derbyshire is going to get there. That's just the kind of gelling and chemistry that we've been waiting for. And it's brilliant to see it.
Yeah, I suppose they've started to pick up on his runs a bit earlier now. He's not being caught offside as much, which is a good thing. But yeah, I suppose moving on, the game really changed when Milicic brought on Orr and Suijnar so that Milligan could push up into midfield there. And he got a goal of his own, to everyone's surprise, I think. I was quite surprised to see him running through with no one on him.
Yeah. It was a good build-up. You see the ball gets played through from, like, we're just sitting in our sort of normal possessing midfield block. Banyat puts the ball in, and it looks like it's going to Milligan, but he knows there's a bit of pace on it, and he knows that Derbyshire is behind him, so he leaves it, and he's not tracked in his run. As soon as he leaves it, he bolts through because he knows, if Matt gets something on this, I could be on the end of it. It's just knowing what the player's going to do before he does it kind of thing, and that's what caused that open goal opportunity for Milligan. Watching it from the sideline though, because I didn't have the angle from where I was at in the bullpen, I was looking at him just being like, pass it to Moody. You look at the replay, Moody Najjar's sitting right next to him being like, just put it on a plate for me. And I'm thinking, he's going to be selfish and this keeper's going to save it. And it's going to be like, you should have passed it. But no, lucky he was able to bury it. And, when you're looking on the replay again, yeah, fair enough. he buried it. He put it exactly where the keeper couldn't get it, and it was a brilliant goal. It was good to see our captain get on the board.
Yeah, definitely. And just watching him play, like even when he was in at centre back there, some of the balls he puts through, he put Susieta through one time, I think, in the first half. He just adds another element to our team, gives us a bit more in the midfield as well when he can ping him from long. Like,
yeah, definitely. I actually like him at centre back. I didn't think I'd be saying that at the start of the season because he's not the fastest guy, and he got exploited against Sydney FC with the pace of Buhaja, as we saw. But I think against teams that play only one striker, where he can just put Sujnia or Jovanovic, whoever he's pairing with, on them and just be a bit of a sweeper for us, I think that role serves him really well. And then he can ping balls from the back. You can see his passing range for the long ball where he sort of does that keeper-style chip. He just knows where to put it, weights it perfectly exactly as we need it, and can really launch attacks from deep, which is, sometimes catches oppositions off guard.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a lot more confident and in control with the ball compared to Jova and Suj. So I think I think you've hit the nail on the head there, saying he's made that spot his own.
Yeah, and then you look at our midfield as well. Him not having to be there, even though he's a good fulcrum and a good pivot, a good anchor man. Him not having to be there means that Benyat can sort of get more into his style of play because they are pretty similar in the way that they play when they're both in the midfield together. And I think it frees up more attacking options like Puyo, like Jeanro, or the likes of Jakey Holman or someone else to come on and do something a bit more progressive with the ball rather than just possessing.
Yeah, definitely. That's, I suppose, another interesting point from the game we should touch on, much to the Herd on the Hill's demise. No Lockie Rose in the side, and we got the job done without him. Same with Charles and Barbara as well, not making an appearance on the bench. No Liam Rose as well. Yeah,
I think it's good in a way. I mean, obviously you had to factor in the midweek trip to Brisbane, which, it takes it out of the players. And I think Milicic has been a bit of a tinkerman. I think he's looked at the way Arsene Wenger used to do things when he was, sort of on top of Arsenal, and he's adapted that sort of coaching style, that philosophy, if you will. The fact that we can leave the likes of Lockie Rose and Liam Rose, Charles and Barber off the bench, even though they are exciting youngsters, but the fact that we can put on other exciting youngsters means that we've got the depth. We clearly were the better side. We put in our best 90-minute performance across any game that I've seen this season. As I was watching, I was waiting for the malaise that we usually get into, for that 10, 15-minute period when the opposition's allowed to come onto us when we're maybe a little bit tired. We are not making the runs off the ball to support our possessing kind of play. I was waiting for all that to kick in, and it just didn't. And it was actually bloody brilliant. You knew, even just at 1-0, you knew that we were going to come away with the 3 points. And, for the eventual hat trick of Matt Derbyshire, can I just say, it's a iconic moment now. It's great to be able to say, I was there. First win at home, the very first hat trick from a Macarthur FC player, and we've witnessed it live.
Yeah, and a proper striker's hat trick, as we mentioned before. Another great ball from Tomiyo, who picks up 2 assists in this game as well. And he probably could have had one more even. And a goal of his own. He had a nice cut in and a shot there as well, I believe. Amazing hat trick.
What do you think? I just wanted to ask before we sort of press on to our next segment, what do you think we need to do to build off this performance? I mean, you can kind of look at it and say maybe Adelaide got their tactics wrong, or they just didn't turn up on the night, whatever the problem might have been. But from our perspective, what do you think we need to do to keep this run going?
Well, like you said, in the second half, we didn't give the other team the game. Like we'd fallen in previous games, we'd fallen into that trap of sort of taking the foot off the pedal. It did happen towards the end of the first half, but the whole second half, they didn't get a sniff at all. I think just having that energy and controlling the tempo of the game obviously helps when we can have 60% possession as well. But we're not always going to be fortunate to have that against teams. But we just need to keep playing at that high intensity, I think it really does wonders for us. We can, take it slow, and then just like that, we can switch it and go full pace at them,
Yeah, and I think even though in the midweek there was a story that came out talking about the 5 subs rule, obviously traditional football, it's 3 subs for 90 minutes, but now we have 3 sub windows in the A-League where you can do up to 5 players. And I think Milicic commented saying that he didn't actually like it, that he prefers the 3 subs because otherwise it just becomes chaos in the last 20 minutes. But I think, as we grow in our stamina and endurance and all that sort of stuff, but bringing on those younger players at the end, once they've got the system in their heads of how we're meant to play, I think it could actually really work wonders for us. We can keep that pressure on, we can keep the energy levels high, and actually exploit the opposition who, are under the pump, presumably, for most of the game with our possession game.
Yeah, and like we've said in previous weeks as well, especially after that Brisbane game, if we have such a deep squad and we can sort of bring on these good players late on in games as well, even if Milicic doesn't like it, we'll be able to take advantage of it anyway. So,
okay, now we've got a new segment. We're going to actually pause a little bit because usually, we'd have an interview or something like that. Unfortunately, we're not able to get anything like that done for you this week. So we've decided we're going to have a look around the league. We're going to count up from the bottom of the table. So, of course, we've got to start with Melbourne Victory, and it's more like Melbourne losery for them this season. They just look so lost. If you've been looking at how they've been playing, their coach, Grant Brebner, has brought in many imports from overseas, such as Rudy Gestead, Jacob Butterfield, Ryan Shotton, Callum McManaman. These names, they're synonymous with Championship and even Premier League football, but they simply haven't gelled. It looks like when you're watching them on the weekend that Brebner micromanages his players. I saw him on the weekend shouting at Robbie Cruz, who was pretty much ignoring him 50% of the time. So I'm thinking maybe that the reason they're down the bottom is not because of the lack of quality, but the lack of, commitment to the coach, if I can coin a phrase there. He's never coached at top level before, so their poor start could be a sign of an unruly dressing room, I reckon. Like all these international stars, Melbourne Victory are obviously a moneyed club, but they've not gelled, they've not hit their stride, and they probably don't respect the coach who's trying too hard, perhaps. But for them, they'll look at this and go, it's simply not good enough, and that they probably deserve a finals berth, despite anchoring the table down the bottom. What about Wellington Phoenix, Daniel?
Yeah, as we've seen throughout the season, they're a side with plenty of promise, and a manager in Ufuk Talay. Is that how you pronounce his name? Ufuk, you fuck. That he seems to know how to get the best out of his players, and they've been on the receiving end of some poor officiating. A lot of their fans have come out over the past year, and they always think they get the short end of the stick with VAR and certain calls from the referee. But I suppose that's just, I think they're beginning to sort of expect it as Wellington fans now, just part of the game that they get the short end of the stick. But they've also had some poor unlucky injuries, to key players, most notably Cameron Devlin and Luke De Vere, severely hampering the spine of their side. And having finished third last campaign, they will be unhappy with their current position, despite the obvious strain the move to Wollongong has put on them.
Yeah, I think it's been rough for them. They've been told, first of all, last season during the pandemic, when they're in the hub scenario, they said, right, get over here. And now they, in the off season, had gone back home, and they've been told again, you're going to stay in the country just because, obviously the overseas travel and the restrictions around that, the quarantine, just makes it unfeasible for them to play games at home. So their home away from home is Wollongong. And, despite it being a nice enough suburb, I suppose it's a bit, it's a bit helter-skelter for them. They can't really find their feet in the A-League. And I think, it's going to be a rough season for them, especially with the way they've started being, in most games, but just unable to get the results, and the injuries starting to pile up. I think they're going to go on a bit of a poor run. Now we turn our attention to Western United, our opposition on the weekend. They're the second youngest side in the comp, obviously. We're the youngest, but they've been involved in plenty of goal fests in their short history. Mark Ruden's side prefer to express themselves through attacking play rather than be conservative, as is evidenced by their 5-4 win over Perth earlier this season. They're going to look to the experience of Bessart Berisha and the poor man's Del Piero Diamanti. Combined with exciting youngsters like Dylan Parias and Tommy Uscock, it means that they're capable of beating any team this year. They're the real surprise packet. You don't know sort of what you're going to get on the day, but you do know that they've got goals in them, but they're also a bit leaky at the back. There's no real strong, defining centre-back or defensive presence for them. They're very young in their backline. Unfortunately, they've kind of lacked that aggressive edge that they also had last season that was enabled them to close out games and hold on to leads. At certain points last season, you'd see Rudan just go, shut it down, boys, and they'd sit back, and then teams would press onto them and they'd actually release a few counterattacks through the speed of someone like a Parias. But this weekend's clash will be an interesting one. I don't know what to really make of it at this point. But yeah, Western United, they're dangerous, that's for sure. But I think we have enough quality to get the W over them. Moving on to Melbourne City. Melbourne, they're a bit of a weird one. Last season, they were the runners-up of the comp, but they've struggled to get firing under their new gaffer, Paddy Gisnorbo. They still have lots of firepower in their ranks, but they've lost 4 of their last 5, including a 3-2 loss to league leader Central Coast, where they led at 1.2-0. They've got Jamie McLaren, obviously, as their striker, who's the Socceroos striker as well, and he's still putting himself about there and scoring enough goals for them to be successful. But unfortunately for them, they can't stop it leaking out at the back. And, McLaren's not one of those players, not one of those strikers that can turn a game on his own. He needs the service and he's quite deadly when he gets it, but they haven't been able to consistently get him involved in games. There was a game, I think, against Melbourne Victory they played where McLaren, you would have said he was the worst on the pitch, but then he scored one late and won him the game. And it's like, he's not a game changer necessarily, but they need to find a way to eke out these results because they've just been wasteful, it has to be said. They've gotten into leading positions and lost them, and they'll be looking at finals as their goal, if not top 4 or top 2. But it's going to be hard to see how they can sort of get out of this funk. They'll have to go on a bit of a run. Adelaide United, we obviously know about them. We smashed them on Friday night, but what can you tell us about them, Daniel?
Yeah, they tend to have a leniency towards youth. However, remains to be seen whether or not it's out of a lack of funds from the club being unable to pull in certain experienced players, and whether or not they just are kind of forced to turn towards the youth that they have.
Yeah, I mean, and also, who wants to live in Adelaide?
Yeah, right. Yeah, no one. For those that weren't sure of the rhetorical answer to that one, no one wants to live in Adelaide. But they do have some hope coming with Craig Goodwin returning on loan. Will definitely give them more strength out wide on the wing-back roles, give them a bit more going forward, not relying on the Toure brothers and Mork to create from the midfield there. So
yeah, it's a lot of pressure they put on those young guys. I know that they're a good story, and it's good to sort of, I guess it's not quite Lockie Rose level hype, but they had a good breakout season, particularly Al Hassan Toure, and then Mohamed Toure sort of came in when Al Hassan was injured and put himself about well. But they're not consistent performers yet, and I think a lot of pressure gets heaped onto them to do a lot of the scoring and attacking for Adelaide. So Craig Goodwin coming back is massive for them. He's kind of their prodigal son in a way. He scored 2 absolute bombs in the FA Cup, I think, not last season before, because obviously last year's FA Cup was cancelled. But yeah, he's going to be huge for them once he gets up and running. So yeah. I don't know. They seem like, to me, a gatekeeper side. I was thinking on last podcast, how we need to get past them. That'll tell us a lot about where we're actually going to be this season. And I think the fact that we beat them 4-0 is a good sign about our prospects this year. Moving on to Newcastle Jets. Tell us about Newcastle, Dan.
Yeah, the Jets find themselves in 7th position, being able to grind out results against opposition that would have expected to beat them, thanks mainly to youngers Valentino Yule and Remy Najarine. It's likely that the underdog effect has taken hold since everyone at the start of the season was writing them off as cellar dwellers, given the club's financial calamities and caretaker coach turned full-time manager Craig Dean's relative inexperience in a managerial role. Newcastle have a grafting doggedness about their play, and with their hungry young players looking to prove a point, they will likely take a few scalps this year without truly threatening the top six.
Yeah, I think when we went to Newcastle, the Bulls, and we got that result 2-1, you could see that they've got something about them without necessarily heaps of quality, but they've got a lot of fight in them. They're a team that could turn up and take all 3 points if they've got the heart with them, if they've got a bit of luck with them, and they'll make any game into a real contest. So, if the likes of a Sydney FC turn up and think, oh, we're just going to roll over these guys, they're not got anything, they could have another thing coming. So it'd be interesting to see how they progress throughout the season. But obviously, they just don't have the seasoned quality of the likes of a Sydney FC, of a Perth Glory, even a Western Sydney, and of course, Macarthur. I don't think they can really compete with us long term, and you won't see them in the six this year, I don't think. Moving on to Perth. Perth, they're kind of the big unknown of this year, just because their quarantine situation's a little bit messed up. Getting in and out of WA every time they go on a little away foray and play a string of games, they have to come back home and then they do the quarantine. They're not necessarily able to train as consistently as they'd like. Their games, their season fixture list just gets delayed, and they're very truncated, I suppose. They've only played 5 so far, but they do have quality in spades. They can turn up missing in some games, though. It's kind of the Perth Glory of yesteryear. I know a couple of seasons ago they were top with Sydney FC, and really they should have won the grand final there in Perth. But they're just inconsistent. You can tell because, there's a new coach, Richard Garcia, is coming in. He's inexperienced. He's going to look to wrangle the squad and get them playing consistently to their potential. But it's a mixture of, experienced guys who maybe coming towards the end of their careers, maybe not firing as well as they have previously been, and then up-and-coming guys who you're not sure if they're going to perform consistently. But just to profile a couple of them, Oilers striker Nick D'Agostino has impressed so far with 4 goals from 5 appearances. And Carlo Armiento looks a future star and could have his breakout season this year. You'll notice Carlo Armiento when we play against them if Archie Thompson's commentating, because he always calls him Carlo Amaretto because he's obviously hungry. So, that youth, I suppose, we'll have to wait and see on them, but they do have dangerous players in Bruno Fornaroli and Diego Castro, so they're always going to be a threat, and they always seem to be pretty solid at the back. So it'll be a tough one. I think they could probably sneak in the 6th, either 5th or 6th, but we'll see how they go.
Yeah, and it must be quite difficult for a lot of those non-Eastern based teams. Like they're not going to have a home game until at least like halfway through the season if things keep going well in regards to the COVID situation. So it's just, not ideal for any team that's playing all away games. Even Wellington in Wollongong is technically a home game, but like
they're away from, they've brought the families over, but they're away from their normal surroundings. It's feeling foreign to them. And I think Perth, it'll have to come down to the travel and how well they can prepare for games without being disrupted by COVID. Simple as that. Moving on to Sydney FC. Sydney have all the resources they need to go back to back under Steve Corica. You just look at their team list. You got Luke Bratton, Milos Ninkovic, Alex Bamiohan. You got Anthony Caceres alongside the returning highest goal scorer in a season, Bobo. And this means that Sydney are really setting the standard. When we play them again at the end of Feb, it'll tell us a lot about our title prospects if we're able to get a win over them. Obviously, we put behind the performance in Campbelltown because, playing against 10 for 70 minutes, that's not exactly fair. Anyway, what we saw was that they're capable of breaking down sides. They like to play similar to us in that they want to possess and then press the advantage when they've tired out their opposition. They've got this sort of intricate passing and they get their wing backs up and down the pitch and into deep areas to swing in the crosses. Trent Buhaja adds a different element for them as well. Typically, in previous years, they've had more of a target man or a poacher in the likes of either a Bobo or Adam Lafondra, but Trent Buhagiar gives him a different element. He can sort of get in behind, and it obviously paid dividends against us when we played him.
Yeah, and they obviously have only played 5 games. They've got 3 games in hand on Central Coast, so 3 wins would see them go top of the table. But yeah, they're definitely in a good position to go back to back to back.
Yeah. So. Just one more thing on Sydney before we go forward. They look a bit sloppy, which is not something you could have said about them in previous years. You look at the Central Coast game where they visited Netstrata Jubilee Stadium, and it looked like they sort of pulled up and thought, oh, Central Coast, you reckon you're all that? Maybe underestimating them a little bit, maybe not, I'm not saying they didn't put an effort in, because they were unlucky with some of their opportunities, but they didn't take them seriously in defense. There was a few calamitous, decisions that, you should have just cleared it, and they didn't. They tried to play around with it, and it cost them. Or maybe they didn't track a runner, got a little bit lazy, and it absolutely cost them because, like we're going to talk about in a moment, Central Coast are just on fire this season. But it maybe suggests that sloppiness could seep into games at certain points, that they're vulnerable more than they were in previous seasons. So we'll have to wait and see about Sydney. I still have them in the top 4, and possibly even, challenging for the title, if not winning the title, but we'll have to wait and see. On to Western Sydney.
Yeah, well, Western Sydney, we've played them twice, 1 win, 1 draw, and they're a pretty good side, to put it lightly. Carl, the poacher, Robinson, has assembled a solid squad, heaping on international talent in Graham Dorrans and Jordan Much, on top of the Wanderers' multiple academy graduates. They've also brought back Mitch Duke, who we've not yet seen in action yet, who was really the heart and soul of their team last season. And you have to say they look finals bound.
Yeah, I mean, what more to say about them apart from that they're scum and that, technically we won the Battle of the West because we got the 4 points across 2 matches. But no, they look like a final side. They haven't actually conceded. Oh no, not conceded. They haven't lost a match since round 1 against us. They just had a succession of draws and a few wins in there. So they look really solid. And we knew they would be. I mean, Carl Robinson, as much as he's maybe screwed over Newcastle in his late off-season move, he's assembled a really good squad there. He's got them playing. You can tell that they're sort of motivated for him. He's got the international connections to be able to bring in, Premier League or Championship talent. So we'll just have to wait and see as to how high they can go. I think they're probably destined for 2nd or 3rd spot if they can keep this run going. But, a poor run of form, and maybe they sink back down a little bit because we know from previous seasons, obviously in 2014, 2015, they had an amazing run of form that took them all the way to the ACL title. But, sometimes they sink and they get bogged down and they can't get out of their poor run of form because they're the type of club that has an expectation of success around them that they sometimes find hard to deal with. And, their fans who can be so voracious and supportive of them can actually sort of turn on them and be, a curse rather than something that helps them.
Akin to Arsenal fan TV.
Exactly.
Anyways, why don't you take us to Brisbane Roar?
Alrighty. So Brisbane, look, they've surprised many being this high up the ladder, but it hasn't just been down to luck. The impressive Japanese import Riku Denzaki, alongside dangerous young gun Dylan Wenzel-Halls, who is tied for the Golden Boot thus far, surprisingly, and veteran former Socceroos striker Scott McDonald, have Brisbane always looking likely to put the ball in the net, while experienced and frankly massive defenders Macaulay Gillespie and Tom Aldred ensure not much gets by them. I think it's interim manager. Oh no, Warren Moon, who's been involved in the club for a little while. It's his first season coaching professionally in the A-League, and he'd be pleased with their position, but wary of a possible bout of poor form after the Bulls' recent smash and grab was followed up by a torrid 0-0 against the Jets at home, where they didn't really create much, and it was almost like the teams laid on just shook hands and said, yeah, 1 point each is fair. So they'll be a bit disappointed with that. Like we said, the Jets aren't someone who you'd want to be just accepting a point from, despite how much fight they have in them. We can maybe look at Brisbane as approaching the start of a dip in form. but they're still probably likely contenders for finals. Time will tell with them. I think they could sneak into the 6, but I don't see them staying up around the company of the likes of Macarthur and Sydney FC for too long.
Hot take. Could be a hot take, could not be.
Also about Central Coast.
Moving on to the top of the Bunnings A-League step ladder, the Central Coast Mariners. They have that ability to finish games so strong. They've been able to squeeze 3 points out of games that typically you would expect that would have ended in a draw or let alone a loss. They've done it multiple times this season. Matt Simon is on top form, along with Daniel De Silva, who's always classy and exciting to watch. But Ella Quall, again, another tied top goal scorer in the league. He's just been absolutely lethal coming off the bench and putting goals in the back of the net.
Yeah, and you look down their lineup. It's surprising. At the start of the season, you would have looked at them and gone, "Oh, maybe they'll be improved. Maybe they won't be bottom of the ladder." But you certainly couldn't have predicted that they'd be top, even at any point, let alone a fair little bit into the season. The likes of Josh Nisbet have been a bit of a breath of fresh air for them. I think he operates sort of a old-fashioned right midfielder. Not just all-out attack, but up and back all day. And he's made sure that the wing backs of opposition that they face have no time on the ball, which really helps them defensively. And Daniel De Silva's actually done the same job for them on the other side. I also think that they've been helped a lot by the 5-sub rule, because Mariners of yesteryear used to sort of fade out of games. They looked very vulnerable and like they sort of weren't fit enough. But a combination of the 5-sub rule and Alan Stajic just being, menacing in the way he prepares his sides, it's paid dividends for them. They always look likely. They always look like they're in games. Even at 2-0 down to Melbourne City, you sort of thought, oh, they could be on here. If they get one goal, they'll get a few. And that's exactly what they did. But prediction-wise, I think being physical for them so far has worked, but it's questionable whether their position at the top is going to last. I think teams will figure them out, maybe weather a bit of a storm with them and be able to sort of outsmart them, if not out-maneuver or out-muscle them. So I reckon they're most likely keeping their position at the top warm for another team, but I don't know what that team is. Hopefully Macarthur, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that physical style of play that they have definitely can be draining over a whole season if it's not managed correctly by Stajic. So surely we still expect them in the top 6.
Yeah, it'd be a massive failure to fall out of the 6 from the position they're at. They've started the season on fire. But that brings to an end our look around the league. So hopefully now, if you're a bit more of a casual supporter of the A-League, you have a bit of a better idea of all the teams and how they're situated, how they'd want to be performing throughout the season and where they'd expect to be. So, why don't we get on to our preview of the Western United match? What do you see happening in this one? I know we sort of talked about the way that Western United play and some of their players, but what do you see sort of happening? And do you reckon we can continue our great run of form?
Yeah, well, we'll be away, and our away form has been quite good. Obviously, Berisha and Diamanti are top players in the league. Diamanti is just absolutely class. Probably one of my favourite players to watch when I can, so I'll be excited to watch the game. But then again, we've been solid at the back the last few game weeks here. We've kept, I think, 2 clean sheets in a row. So whether or not we can keep them out and play our game and break them down at the back, which teams are seemingly being able to do. So I think it'll be an interesting one to watch and hopefully should be a win for Macarthur.
Yeah, you got to look at that ladder position and think, we should be taking them all 3 points from them when we visit it. But we sort of discussed a bit earlier how Western United, they've been a little bit unlucky. I think if they can, tighten things up at the back, they still are a threat definitely going forward. They're never going to not score goals. So I think it's a case for us of, can we weather the storm? Can we score when we're on top? Because I don't think we'll have the same absolute dominance for 90 minutes that we had over Adelaide. We're going to have to, do our bit when we've got the opportunity. But yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. And it's one that we should be coming out of with a W. My score prediction for this one, I think it'll be another goal fest. I think we're going to come up 3-2 victors. What do you reckon, Dan?
3-2. Yeah. Hopefully Derbyshire can continue his hot streak of form. But yeah, similar to you, I think it'll be like a 2-1 or something in that ballpark there. I don't think any clean sheets will be kept.
Yeah, I just don't see us keeping them out. Like, they have such attacking power, but I also think they're pretty vulnerable. So if we can just, make the same opportunities as we did last Friday, if we can continue in that vein of form with all the chemistry we've been creating over the weekends and weeks of training, there's no reason why we can't go there and win.
Yeah, exactly. And if Federici is able to have another quiet game, then that's our job done, because he's only had to face probably only like 2 potential goal scoring chances in the last 2 games combined. So
yeah, I didn't really notice him on the pitch, to be fair, last week. But that's a good thing for us, and long may it continue. Yeah, so we play against Western United at 5:05 p.m. on Saturday, the 20th of Feb at Mars Stadium in Ballarat. I don't think it's going to be the biggest match ever. Victoria just coming out of their COVID restrictions again. I think a few people might be reluctant, and Western United being a new side, they're not exactly the most well supported, but it'll be an enthralling matchup nonetheless. Any final words, Dan?
Should be hopefully another exciting week of football, and hopefully we come into next week's podcast all smiles after a good win. Just to wrap it up, be sure to like, subscribe, follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and hit up our socials, Instagram especially. It's been growing nicely. And on Facebook, since there's been a bit of a crackdown from Facebook on Australian news websites, we might be the only Bulls website that you have left to get some information.
You're right. The Macarthur FC page got taken down, like completely cannot post. So if you want any news on the Bulls, you know where to find us. All right. Thanks for listening so much, guys, from myself, Blake, and my brother, Dan. We really do appreciate the support on this pod. Thank you for listening to Bull Banter, and we'll catch you next week.